longer a weakness. They feel better about it because they feel confident enough on something they need to know.
Oh, let's go. Party time.
It's a whole continuum, and every single preference is on that continuum.
Adjust their chin angle down so they can perceive the ball up a little bit more.
All right, welcome back to an episode of the MPE podcast. Nick Robinson here alongside Matt Swope, David Genest, and Matt Woods. Welcome back to another episode. We have a lot going on right now. There's a lot going on in softball for us, for in the baseball world.
The New York
The New York
Knicks.
Knicks.
The most
I have
important
it on my list
New
there.
York Knicks.
I mean, we
That's
can't
right.
not
I mean,
bring that up.
you
That's
have
the
to wear
most
the
important
sweatshirt.
part. That's the most important part.
Yeah, 100%. No, that's awesome. It's a great time to be a Knicks fan with a lot of suffering. So I suffered through Jeremy Lin, and now I get Jalen Brunson. So I'm basically a winner in itself. But we're editing the e-course right now. We're editing another e-course. We're excited to get that moving. What's really special, and a lot of us are really excited about, is go and take a look at softball. We've been really lucky to work with the programs that we've worked with. Really fortunate. So we had 11 teams in regionals. We had 7 teams in a super, and we have 3 teams currently going to the Women's College World Series, which is so awesome. So many great staffs that we worked with. I'm just like, I want to hear, David, like your reaction to that, just from our first couple of clinics that we did on the road back when South Carolina was at Charlotte. We were there, and going into OU for the first time. Just take me through your kind of reaction for that.
That's great to see our clients being able actually to, push themselves like more and more and get better results. And so I really actually am happy for them first. Like I was in touch of, I would say probably almost all of the coaches or recently during this regional and super regionals, trying to actually again give them cues and just I think that's getting back to our previous talk just before registering the podcast, recording the podcast. There's one thing I discovered this year is we are helping players, right? We are teaching coaches how to become their best. We're teaching coaches to communicate better with their athletes. But again, I just discovered this year that the coaches themselves, they have nobody to talk to. It's crazy the amount of pressure they have. And actually, I was almost like a how do you call that? Psychologist? Is that it?
Yeah. Therapist.
It was
Yeah, I probably would say therapist.
almost, yeah, it was almost that job. That was crazy, but I like it. I'm fine doing it, but it just made me conscious like how much pressure it is. Like when we started 2 years ago, I was kind of new into this world of NCAA sports and the money and everything. I was just like passionate about what I'm used to do, like helping people and teaching MPs, and that was my goal. Like I was like, I'm fine with that. Now through the time, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a whole industry. There's like pressure everywhere. There's money everywhere, and I think I really actually enjoy the progression of our clients, but I also like the progression of kind of myself in a way that, oh, that's kind of it's like peeling an onion. You're taking one layer, and, oh, you get another one. And actually, I'm discovering every year new layers. I'm peeling my onions, and that's true. And but it's funny to see really like how the coaches were enjoying all the talks, all the phone calls, and they were kind of able to release kind of maybe the pressure on someone is like totally outside of their business or their daily routines. And I think that's something like we talked last time, but I really think that's something I want to dive a little deeper and find a way actually to help the coach as well, because they are in a very stressful situation with the portal, with the NIL, with all the change that NC is doing right now. And I think you can maybe feel lost or handcuffed per se as a coach because there are so many variables around you, and now you're trying to build something, but you cannot actually because you don't even know if your player is going to be here next year. So it's that's my what I'm actually get from our first 3 years doing like the first clinics, and now it's I'm still learning the US reality of the sports, the coaches, the business, the industry. And it's a
Well, well, I
process.
think what you're talking about, he's finally integrated into the culture, right? Like this is the world I'm living in every
Yeah.
day. I think the hardest part at this high of a level, we came in as a company where we were only working with high level exclusive, colleges or clients or major league players or professional players, and there's a lot of stress. I think what he was talking about, the hardest thing for coaches, especially where I'm at, is there isn't an outlet, right? There's a hierarchy, there's a level amount of pressure, there's ego, hey, am I smart enough? Do I bring this up? There isn't this outlet or to express or to discuss this a lot of things. I think there probably is on the best staffs in the country, and having that, but that's not how it goes. You look at Major League Baseball. There's a hierarchy of what's going to be executed, and there isn't probably a ton of room for a lot of open dialogue and discussion on how we're going to grow and whatever, right? And I think there's a lot of coaches that feel that way as well. So I think it's a great point that you make where, there's got to be an outlet or an open dialogue for coaches to discuss and have that. And a lot of time they feel isolated, right? Because what happens is, and we had a very average year, and I feel it too, is when you're not winning, there's a certain amount of internal pressure and inherent pressure that comes. So, then staffs start, everything is looked under a microscope, and then maybe there's some blame or feeling towards other members in the staff, and then it becomes more contentious, right? And there's nothing you can do to overcome that with losing. Like there's just nothing, right? If you care at all, you're going to try to go dig down deeper and try to find every little tiny nook and cranny to make it better. But you're right. There's this inherent pressure and money and winning and all these different things that's baked into it. So um, I do think what we're talking about is everything always comes back to communication. So the growth that you're feeling within the culture, what we're trying to do with MP, not only, with my staff or as a company, is how do we get better at communicating across the board in all areas, whether it's anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, MP, all the things we discussed before the pod, is the more that we can be on the same page and aligned with what we believe, then it just becomes more of like clientele and character and belief and culture and things that more buy into the program. And there's not a lot of room for all these other areas to kind of fill in, because when you lose, everything gets exacerbated, period. It just does. Everything's exacerbated. Everything's under the microscope. When you win, it's not. So I think that's a great point. But I think you're fully getting integrated now that you live in the United States. You're fully integrated into our high stress culture, competitive nature, from the New York boy, from the Boston fan to the DC sports fan. You're fully ingrained to the culture right now.
No doubt. And a lot of it, I think, is that not only, David, you're kind of getting more accustomed to the culture, but we're also learning every year. And that's a big thing. Like learning, what maybe our college programs are interested in, or new discoveries that we have, or whatever it is. I think we're learning, and that's a huge part of it. And during this exciting time as well, is a time where we get to start booking out our summer and our fall. And it's getting a little busy. Matt, why don't you talk a little bit about that and what this time looks like in terms of our scheduling?
Yeah, 100%. I think, as teams, unfortunately have their seasons come to a close, good, bad, or indifferent. They have to shift their focus towards next year and how they are going to either, improve on what they did from the year past, try to repeat it again, or start fresh and go with a new philosophy. So, right now we're talking with a bunch of teams that are are looking to have us out and to, learn and become avid learners as coaches and continuously push towards, their best versions of themselves. So, right now, a lot of it is booking out the fall, and we're lucky enough that August and September have been completely booked out, and have been talking to a bunch of different schools and organizations that we're really, really, really excited to either meet for the first time and introduce MPs to them, and learn about their schools and build relationships with them, as well as also returning to schools where we get to continue those relationships. We get to help them improve on areas that they want to work on, as well as find some different answers to what may have gone wrong from the past year. So, we always say we're always going to get along with avid learners. We're always going to get along with progressive coaching. And, we found that the staffs that, we've been lucky enough to work with this year, and, specifically in softball with the 11, that were able to make the tournament, like, they're the most progressive learners in the industry. They already had really, really successful teams, but it's also it's no doubt in my mind why they've been successful in the past, because they are the ones that are still trying to learn and push the boat forward. So, it's just a really, really exciting time. And anytime you're able to interact with new people, or build upon relationships that you already have, is super, super exciting in our realm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
we get a chance to go there. Sorry, go ahead, Swoper.
no, I was just going to say, I think the advantage we have with like us as a staff is being, former players and someone who's a coach is like most of our talks with these teams. Yeah, David, there's a psychological aspect of it which he's really, really in tune with that helps, but like day to day in game action, right? Like to win the game. Like we're literally having cool, active conversations on stuff that's going to affect tomorrow. And obviously that's how I'm wired being in it as a coach, but you guys are too as former players. But David brings that psychological. So we can hit both. And that's the coolest part when you see the action day to day and things that you're integrating. I think that gives us such an advantage as opposed to just working on a swing or just trying to have a metric be better or whatever. And there's a time and a place for that. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But whatever these actionable things that we're attacking daily are affecting the outcomes in mostly in a positive way. That's the coolest part for us. And I think that, the experience that we bring to the table and all different avenues.
Yeah, I think to
Yeah.
add on to that, like literally this week, in the last 2 weeks, as regionals and super regionals have been going on, as David has alluded to, we've talked with a team, more about the mental side from the coaching perspective. We've talked about someone from a fielding perspective, how we can help them handle a certain type of bounce better. We've talked with a hitter on what's a cue, or like what type of talk do they need? Do they need to watch a little bit more film because they're building their present from the past, or maybe more of a futuristic cue based on the profile? Like, or are we helping, a staff with, they're getting tired towards the end of the year. What pitches are they going to be able to tolerate more, and which ones are you going to have to be a little bit more selective when you throw? So I think being able to help out these schools, and even ones who are done playing, like looking at potential people that they might want to bring in the portal, and what that looks like, and where can they, like, there's so many different avenues where MP apply. It applies to every avenue. And I think being able to help teams out in their own little nuances is just a definition of MP in itself.
And what we really enjoy, in addition to all that great stuff, is when we get to go there and we get to interact with those programs and we get to kind of get into the life. Matt's already smirking because he's know what I'm going to say. We go there and we're fully integrated to the program. We go to Oklahoma State, and I won't stop hearing "Go Pokes" even when we get back to the hotel room. You go to Kansas and I hear "Rock Chalk" every day. So we try to integrate ourselves into, and really become part of the program, because we believe that's important. Understanding who the coaches are, getting a chance in a short amount of time to learn about the athletes and kind of just develop those relationships and that communication pattern. And for us, fortunate enough, it leads to another update that we get to have is, kind of being able to have that relationship with a program is the announcement of the Gasso Center of Excellence. Something that's really cool, really special, that I know all of us are excited about. I'm curious to just get a quick, thought on what to expect, and kind of, what your thoughts are on that. So why don't we start with you, Swoper?
Yeah, I just think anytime you can align with elite people, it's a great thing. So I just almost one of the goats in the softball industry and in the world. Everybody knows the name. I think the more we can align with people like that, that's how we kind of got into this, right? Was to align with great people, grow and build things together. And I think us being able to do that with a facility like this, what great people. It was kind of cool. They were my first client, right? So they were my first school that we ever reached out to and kind of work with in softball. And I think that's a credit to them and how it started. Of they were coming off a national championship, but wanted to learn more and did not want to stop and wanted to grow and continue that, right? So it's kind of cool for us as a company and for me as one of our first clients that we ever had that wanted to learn and grow more, evolve to now with something I think will be a facility for elite, and it's a great partnership with us to move forward in what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's really awesome. It's really special. There's a lot of super exciting things that we have coming. Matt, why don't you talk about what we have coming up?
Yeah, 100%. I think, to add on to what Swope said and then also to go into what we have coming up, like I think we're always constantly trying to take steps in terms of accessibility. Like how many athletes can we help? And, as Swoper alluded to, you know, recently it's been a lot of exclusive teams, it's been a lot of exclusive orgs, and we want to start, being accessible to more players, high school players, middle school players. And I think the Gasso Center of Excellence is that first step where, from the immediate future, we're looking to raise up the level of development in and around the area of Oklahoma, but also on a national level, be able to have a place where people can go and get assessed and get immersed into the information and just become their best versions of themselves from a self-coach standpoint, from just being aware, like they're, especially in this day and age, and I know Swoper can allude to this, but everybody, whether it's the portal or high school trying to get into college, like you have to be, self-sufficient. You have to be aware of yourself. You have to look out for yourself. And, this has now become an avenue where you can become your best self-coach and filter all the information that is out there. So, we have coming up in about 3 weeks now, which is super exciting. We have another coaches clinic where we're going to combine both, new coaches looking to learn MP as well as coaches that are returning to, pick up more tidbits, able to communicate and connect with other people in our community. And then we're going to parlay into it a high school camp where, we're going to be doing assessments as well as some implementation sessions and giving, those girls the ability to, start to become their best self coaches. And then, we have a little, private college softball session where we're going to be able to work with a couple of high level athletes that are excited to come down and get some summer development underway. So really, really exciting events coming up. Constantly trying to push more information out to you guys with a new book coming out in the next couple months, and as well as a couple more e-courses. So stay tuned. The information is going to start flowing. And we're always open, for questions. Our emails are on the website. Email us directly. A lot of people in our community have our numbers. Text us. We want to help out the masses and help as many people as possible.
Yeah, and David, lastly, your thoughts. What are you excited for takeaways? What are you most excited about in terms of the Gasso facility?
I'm gonna travel more to the best milkshake ever.
Kind of loves the milkshake.
That was the best ever.
Yeah,
Uh, no, I think it's a big step for MPs for murder preferences in the US. And it's for me, it's just like a big one and a small one at the same time because we know what's coming next. So, but we are starting to do things actually really the right way, make it more accessible to more people. What I agree with Woods is about being able to be your own coach. And I think right now with the portal, it may be more important than ever because knowing what you can do, what you cannot do, what you can expect, what you look for may actually help you to find the right team, but also it's going to help the coach, like, because you're coming with your own knowledge, like, hey, I know this is my profile, I know what I like to do, I know what I like to train, how, so maybe like, I'm curious about the next 10 years, actually. I want to see what's going on. But no, that's a great news. I mean, I love Padigaso. We're in relations with Jimmy as well, and and OU players and staff. So it's yeah, just maybe warning people, be ready.
Warning people, be ready, and also watch out for your milkshakes because those will be drank as well.
Yes.
Uh, so like like we all said, there's a lot of good updates, and um, so it's exciting for us. And why don't we get into the topic of today's episode specifically is the successful implementation of motor preferences and what that looks like, and kind of an overview of how to get there. So the first step that we always talk about, we're always going to understand the athlete, right? More than just the assessment, right? So the background, the context is so important, number one. Um, so globally speaking, what would you say, Woodsy, when it comes to like a misunderstanding of like interpreting motor preferences before anything else, what would you say is like one of the more common misunderstandings in terms of like the implementation of it?
Yeah, I think, it's not so much a misunderstanding. I think it's getting bogged down by what you have always been teaching, and now you have stumbled upon or found or gone through and understood this great knowledge. It makes sense. And you have all this new information. You're thinking about the players that maybe you coached away from their profile. You're thinking about the players that you maybe coached into profile, and now you're like, wow, okay, I'm here. I have this information. What the heck do I do here? And I think helping coaches get past that mental block and start looking at things holistically. And, for us, it doesn't have, it's not a science project when we start working with players, and it's about understanding where they're come from, where they're coming from, but also where they want to go. And it's understanding, what training have they done before? What has their intention been? What has their injury history been like? So we understand compensations that they may be moving with, and then also understand, the athlete and their personality and how they like to be talked to. I think, Coach Swope, when I first got to Maryland, started talking about some kids he needed to put an arm around and other people he needed to get on them. And I was one of those guys that, he needed to light a fire under my butt at times, and that's how I responded. So it's, before you start talking about someone's A swing, before you start talking about someone's pitching arsenal, it's like, can we understand the holistic view of the athlete and then just be realistic with what we're trying to do with them? What problems are they facing, whether it's mechanically or mentally? And then we can use the detailed information of their motor preference assessment, and we can find those tailored, answers for them with less trial and error. And we also know we're keeping them healthy. So the big theme is, can we look at this holistically? The problems aren't changing, the situation isn't changing for this athlete, but can we just take a step back? Okay, this is what we're working for. Here's some more detailed information. Boom, let's get to the answer a little bit faster.
Yeah, step one, is going to come with getting the information, right? Like understanding your athlete, like you're saying. And once we do that, we're able to go through the observation piece of it. And Swope, I think we've talked about this a couple times, but can you just talk to early on? It's, the first couple weeks of practice. What does that look like for you guys? You have the assessment information, but what does this observation timeline look like for you guys?
Yeah, number one, I'm going to go back to this. The number one misconception is that we coach everybody the same. That's number one. Is like we have to put information out there that people can absorb and simplifies it enough for you to understand that it's different from other information you have. But number one is that we coach everybody the same, and there's this rigid. That's the opposite of what MPE is. That's the opposite of why I've got into coaching and been a coach and had success at times. Like that's the opposite of what it is. So that's the misconception. We do not coach everybody the same. And then two is my job is the athlete in front of me. How are they going to absorb anything that I'm coaching them? Period. Right? What are they absorbing? So some could be cues, some are external cues, some is actual analytics and going through the swing and there's all different ways, but it's how are they actually absorbing the information, right? So that's the point of coaching, right? The point of coaching is knowing what the athlete does and what he needs, and that's a partnership, right? That's not a dictatorship, that's a partnership. So when you're talking about what I can do with your question is the first 3 weeks to a month, I'm just observing, right? Because if someone's been the best player on their team their entire life, which they are when I get them at my level, they're the best player. They haven't really probably experienced failure. I have to see how they're doing things, how are they handling failure, how are they handling the timeline socially from adapting from high school to college, or how are they handling the speed of the game? What's their mental part of it, right? Do they care about the mental game? Do they meditate? Do they think it's stupid? Like there's all these factors that are coming in during this period of these first 3 weeks of a month where you're trying to absorb all this as a coach, and then okay, what's going to be the strategy on how we communicate together? And you have to see it through their lens. It's never going to be through your lens. They're not you. So if you're a coach at this time in society and life and you're not seeing it through their lens, you're going to fail, period. Right? So I'm trying to help them understand MP through their lens, right? And it's going to come in 10, 15, 20 different forms probably, right? Um, and that's pre-game routines, like in-game routines, on deck routines, in the box routines, on the mound. Like there are so many layers to these different things, but you have to be able to see it through their lens. So what I do is observe during this period, and you're doing it in recruiting too. And what you're trying to do is then feed them information in the way that they need it. And a lot of times I could have a couple players that don't have any idea what their profile are. They don't, right? Because they're not ready as a freshman for me to go all deep into the analytics of exactly, you know, 9 different preferences and they need to know every one because they're mentally not ready to handle all that, right? Maybe it was just their routines of 3 to 4 drills that are constraining them into their preferences, or maybe he's using a long bat in the first round of BP and doesn't even know why he's using it because he's large and it's easier for him not to think about it, right? That's the job of the coach to understand what they can handle, what they can't, and seeing it through their lens. So it's not always cut and dry. This is the point of coaching, right? This is why we do it. This is what coaching is. It's not do it this way. It's not my system works, right? That may work at LSU. I don't know. Maybe it does work there, but I mean, they're not making the tournament either, right? Is that maybe when you're getting the best athletes all the time, you can have that type of system and it works. I'm not saying it doesn't, but for the majority, 99% of America, whether they're in college or high school or whatever, that's not the way it's going to work to be successful. So what we're trying to do is, like I said, just see it through their lens, try to teach it. In ways that you know they're going to understand it and they can utilize day to day. And that's going to be different from the over analytical guy who wants to see every TrackMan report or swing report to the guy that just needs external cues and vision cues to the guy that's, hey, it's a pregame routine that these 4 things make him feel really good. And he does understand why he's doing them from a preference standpoint. To maybe we're taking care of that on things he doesn't understand, from soles to the right shoes, to the right meditation before, which he doesn't understand. So there's all different types of layers, but this is the importance of why coaches need to be educated on all these things that we always talk about, because you're going to limit yourself if you don't.
For sure. And it's just hearing you talk about those steps is like at an MP level, and you even mentioned it. It's the same as the analytics stuff, like you said. Some people are going to look at the TrackMan, some aren't. I know a bunch of guys, and it's crazy to me because I can never be this person. They don't want to watch video. Like they don't care about the video they have. For me, I would prefer to watch video after every throw that I made, or a delayed kind of showing on the screen. I would like to see myself. Some guys don't want to see it at all. And with just understanding that alone, we could all agree as clinicians, as coaches, as whoever you are, you work with players, you see that there's a difference in it. Um, and I think another big thing, just in talking with Tom about things, is you have no idea at the age of 8 if they were told this move is bad, and in at 8 years old, their entire life they were told this is the wrong move, right? And that influences the way that they're growing up. It'd be the same as if you were told at 3, hey, 1 + 1 = 4, and you're like, well, okay, like you don't know better because you were told at a young age that
I mean,
something
Matt Shaw's
is
the
a fact.
yeah, Matt Shaw's the perfect example of his back heel was off the ground, right? When he came in and hit, he was like, "Oh, that's okay," and that's exactly it right there. Yeah, it's okay. And you just the relief and the feeling of so many different people telling him why his back heel wasn't attached to the ground, or like even that, it's exactly what you're talking about, is trying to get through that in that first month and all the things that you're talking about to trying to disarm everything, right? I think that's the word, disarm, to where we can actually get to this partnership and then see if we can help, you know?
Yeah, because you're trying to find essentially, like you saying that just makes me think we're trying to get to that blank slate. It's like if there's a bunch people paint all over this canvas, like we're trying to clear this out so we can see what's actually underneath there.
Yeah, and I think it's hard.
Um,
There's so much information online, and not only as we know the phones or the reels and the shorts are frying the dopamine in society and the kids' brains. They they want to do the right things by learning more and get better, but it's too much. There's too much access to information, not enough grit and time actually being put into any one thing to improve. It's, oh, I'll try this drill for a day. Oh, I'm going to go switch it 2 days later and do another one. It's out of control, right? So it's more important now than ever where there's too much access of information to the players for the coaches to be educated so we can help guide them, right, on what's probably good and what's not good.
100%. It's that just understanding communication we keep going back to. That's always going to be the central theme of any good coaching, any good relationship, and within not just sports, obviously, but with everything. So kind of start by understanding the athlete in front of you. You move on to the point where we're observing. Swoper, you mentioned you just taking the time to see, and understand the player. And one of the things that I think is really important that we always kind of create is this understanding that there's always going to be a root cause for something, right? So when we're able to understand a profile, we can actually go back and say, okay, because this player is moving like X, we understand why they might be missing the ball arm side high. They might be dragging the barrel of the bat behind them. They might be only rolling over to the pull side on the ground and they can't elevate anything there, right? We can have some information about it. So, David, I'm curious to kind of ask you when it comes to understanding the root cause, how important is that? And when you're looking at adjustments, understanding the player's profile, what does that process look like for you? And kind of what the starting point is. Matt and I talked earlier about how balance is super important. So take us through that process of making an adjustment by understanding that root cause.
Well, the first root cause um, that I think probably 99% of the coaches are not aware of is the morphology of the player. That's the root cause of how you move because you have a structure and you cannot change it. Now, if you have short leg, long leg, if you have short trunk, long trunk, if you have short arms, long arms, you don't manage them the same way. So now we have to consider the morphology of the player. We have to consider the physiology of the player. Is he mainly fast twitch? Is he mainly slow twitch? Is it mix? So that's those information. That was probably one of the main surprise I have when I start to work in the baseball in the US that nobody knows about physiology of the players. I was like shocked. I was like, it's kind of the basic things we do in Europe, which is actually for me that's a root of everything because at the bottom line, if we don't have players, we have no game, right? So the first thing we need is players. But what are players? There are organic system, human beings. Everybody is different, specific morphology, specific physiology. If you don't understand that, that's a wrong start. Okay, now when you get that is, okay, how is he moving? Really looks like easy when he's doing things. Yes, no. Do you feel it like struggling? Does he need to do 100 reps to adjust himself because you think this is a better movement for him? The guideline for us is more reps you need to do, but it is. So it's very simple because I'm always going back to cross your arm on your chest. You don't even think about it. You just do it. You don't have to train yourself to do that. Now, maybe you need to do some reps, but to adjust something, but actually normally the body should understand pretty quickly. Now we have to consider also the primitive reflex. We have to consider where the player is coming from. Is it a freshman? Is it a senior? Like a freshman has a lot of psychological pressure. A senior, maybe yes, but he's more mature and actually is dealing with something else. So we really have to consider all those things first of all. Then when you get your player into his profile, it should actually train less. We observe about 30% less practice. You don't need to repeat again a gesture that is natural and instinctive for you. And when you arrive at that level, like D1 NCAA or Pro Bowl, I mean, you're normally pretty good. Okay, so it's just more like little adjustment rather than a rule change. Now can you perform outside of your profile? Yes, you can. Every time the question is how much it costs you. Are you gonna hurt yourself? How many times have you been hurt? That's sometimes a lot of questions when we do what is called anamnesis, which is actually the diagnosis of your player when he comes in, all the question we ask, history and everything. When you have the profile and you get back to the history of injuries, you're like, yeah, makes sense. Because you did this and that, this and that happened. And we're trying actually again to put them gently and step by step into their profile. So we need maximum 3 priorities per month, work on something first. When it's done, okay, we can move on to the next one. But implementation with players is very like talk to them with their own language, keep your knowledge as a coach because you can observe a lot and you have your own lens to see the world and you have your own expertise. And again, when a player starts to smile, this is probably the best thing, the best tool ever. When a player starts to smile, you're on a good track.
Yeah, David, that's a really good point. Like I think like facial reactions or verbal feedback is always something that we're trying to understand and probably the most important information that we can get from a player. Like there's nobody that knows the player better than themselves. They're going to be able to tell you what cues have made sense to them. They're going to be able to tell you, okay, I feel like I'm constantly crashing or I feel like I'm constantly stuck on my back leg. I feel like I have trouble repeating throwing to the glove side. I feel like I have trouble fielding the ball to my forehand. Like they know where they're deficient, they know where their insecurities are, and they also know what's very easy for them. So being able to understand them through their own feedback is where we're going to start from a root cause standpoint. Like, okay, visually as a coach, I can see that you are constantly rolling the ball over to the pull side and you have no pull side elevation. Okay, what are you feeling? What's your feedback? What's your cues? What are you trying to do? What's your intention? And a lot of the times we can get an answer, what they're understanding or what they're feeling or what they're trying to do in their feedback. And then we can also have combine that with the information we know from the assessment, and we start to get to the answer pretty quickly. So from a root cause standpoint, feedback is going to be utter important. And then David brought up another great point is, when we're working with players, there's a player that's moving out of profile and they're not in pain and they're performing, we're not going to say anything. Do your thing. We know in the back of our head, as soon as there's stiffness or pain or a drop of performance, okay, we have tailored information to them to get them back on track within their profile. But we're always going to judge everything based off of pain and performance. You're good on both, we're good. If one's off when you would already make an adjustment, now you have tailored information towards the player. So when we start with integration, everything's based off of their feedback. And then always our 2 questions, are you performant or in pain? And that's how we start going at root cause.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
something else with that where there's a lot of talk between coaches, and I think this is where they get confused at like the root cause is always like a skill acquisition standpoint is reps, like David said, right? But there's a difference between a constraints-led approach that you could utilize or differential learning. An example would be like if you put in certain countries they put the soccer field and they shrink it, right? And they want this like environment where they're forcing different things and stress or Messi is going to have a completely different type of style of play and skill acquisition than Ronaldo would in that environment. One being like more terrestrial, one being more aerial. So even within the skill acquisition and reps, there may be reps needed for certain players, right? But the skill acquisition environment, which is kind of what David was saying, it's also important to understand that that way when we are going to coach them or do certain things that's essentially part of the root cause and it's very deep. But I think a lot of coaches are so confused at skill acquisition, they just always revert back to reps and doing it more because they see improvement in the moment by them what they're saying. But the next day it may not adhere or they go right back to what they were doing the next day. So skill acquisition is almost goes hand in hand with some of the stuff we're talking about with the root causes and setting them up in the right environment to actually get better, which I'm telling you is very challenging, right? It is. But that's why we're coaching. That's why we're here to be able to set those people up for success.
I talked
No
to
doubt.
a trained coach that, I know very well and have known for a long time. And he brought up the other day, like, for people who are, haven't dove into MP, a real easy way to look at the world is there's so many different systems out there. Why are they all in business? That's because their system works for some players. So they have success within their own system. So they keep doing it and they keep getting people in the door. But then we're also not going to hear about the people that also struggled and didn't take to their system. It's the perfect example of motor preferences out there is there's so many different models out there and they're all in business for a reason because they've had success. But then those players that don't fit that system that come into their door, we don't hear about them and now they're out looking for another system. So just look at the world, look at all the different models out there and they're right for the right person. So all we're trying to do from an integration standpoint is understand the player in front of us, understand the system or the model or the constraints that make sense for them and set them up for success. And again, we double down on this does not change talent. It just optimizes you as a player. Whether it's taking you from a bench high school player to an average high school player, if that's your talent level, no problem. Like we're good. You can put your head on the pillow at the end of the day knowing like I gave it my all. I optimized myself for whatever that is, and we're good. Everyone knows not everybody's a major leaguer. Everyone knows not everyone's going to play in the AUSL and softball. But can we give ourselves the best chance to be successful at whatever level we're at? We're good.
Yeah, and I deal with that with players all the time. I mean, it's everybody has a crutch. Like if someone's not having success, they immediately want to go get more information or blame something. I think that's like human nature when it comes to players, to coaches. You're trying to align with people that buy in to understand what they can do to grow and get better, whether it's a coach or a player. And the more people that you have like that, the more success you're going to have. If you have these types of players that overload themselves with information or are trying too much, or coaches that, hey, my system has worked for 20 years, okay, you're going to have success with some. But as a whole, holistically, we all know, and anybody with any common sense knows that's probably not going to work.
Yeah, one thing that I really I appreciate, and I hope that the listeners do as well. Part of this is that we didn't start this. We said, the goal is to understand, successful integration of motor preferences, and we didn't start with integration and cues and drills. Like it takes all these steps now to understand the player, and then we get to say, at a certain point, do we need to make an adjustment? Do we not need to make an adjustment? And then if we do, now we can make that decision. But for about 30 minutes now, we're talking about successful integration, and we haven't talked about actually, drills, cues, all the things that, typically you want to start with. As a coach, you want to get in the cage right away. You want to put the work, and the player wants to put the work in. You don't really want to take the time to have those conversations typically, but it shows how important it is. And one thing that I like that Matt was talking about in terms of those systems is like, to play devil's advocate, always understanding that there's more context within players that, are training than you might be seeing on the outside. A player might be dealing with something personally. A player might have just got traded. There might be more stress than ever, right? And while players are going through different systems or they're trying different things, always understanding that there's context as well that go behind it is super important. So the context is another theme in addition to the communication. So, you got something?
Yeah, the context is important. We're trying to educate coaches. I'll give you an example of like if I'm only dealing with the trainer or my physio and says, "Hey, we're still doing FMS screens," and he comes to you and says, "Hey, he has a lack of IR in his front hip or a lack of ER in his back," or something like this, right? And he gives you that information. That's been the model, right, that we're relying on. So that physio or trainer starts doing X and tells the player that, right? Instead of, David saying, well, okay, so what if that's what if that's an advantage? What if that's a positive thing, right? Like it doesn't necessarily mean you have to fix it. So that's part of the context we're talking about, is getting these coaches to empower them to grow and learn more, to understand these other systems and models, which all we deal with this in sports is a physio, a strength and conditioning, is all these different silos that these people do their thing. And so it just filters down to where it has a massive implications on the field and what you're trying to coach. But coaches don't even know it, right? Because they think they're the expert. So that's one of been my favorite part, is growing and learning from David and the science and all that. to try to integrate and bring all these people together contextually instead of just like, oh, that's his field, he's right. But that could be affecting so much of what you're trying to do on a day-to-day basis. That's where I think the context comes in, and it's so massive, and why it's so important right now for coaches to learn and get an idea about everything.
I want to add
No,
on top of that is people should tell themselves every time I'm having a judgment, what I'm based on. Yeah, like what I'm referring to. Is it personal? Is it a mental image? Or is it kind of relative to the player? Because you can tell a player this is a good swing, well, that's going to be a good swing for him. Now, if it becomes your own reference and you start to judge everybody on that swing and you try to make everybody look like him, well, this is where actually your judgment is false. So very important to always think about, yeah, I'm judging something good or bad. Again, it's compared to what?
And that's where the common knowledge and the communication comes in. I always ask coaches that pushback, and we love the pushback. I think it's the most important thing we do in this world is push back and have these tough conversations. Well, what are you doing? What are you assessing? How are you coaching? How are you coaching this individual? Please explain to me your assessment process. Is it biomechanical? Is it based off morphology? What are you actually utilizing as part of all these different assessments to actually coach? Because you got to have some baseline knowledge to have an educated opinion based off the person in front of you, right? So that's where, it's really, really important to have these conversations because we're all trying to get to a point in sports where we're doing as good as of a job we can during the assessment process to understand the athlete in front of us to help them. That's it. But there's so many differing systems and opinions and things that are going on where that's where we're getting into to the trouble arguing about this, that, and the other thing. So I always say is like, okay, well, what are you guys currently doing? And then a lot of times there's a lot of silence, right? It doesn't matter if it's a theory. It doesn't matter if it's a proven scientific publication, which we have. It doesn't matter what it is, right? You still have to be educated enough to understand what is the assessment, what are you doing, and how are you communicating it to the player? And there's no way it can be the same. Like the teacher man argument now is like, and he's still whatever. Like anybody that has a brain that has any common sense towards whatever is like, come on, man. Like it's almost laughable now to the point where it is comical. But at the same time, is like trying to push the envelope on what is that they're doing because orgs are trying to do it. Certain people are trying hitting coaches, facilities, different organizations, but they're so drastically even in strength and conditioning and physios, and they're so drastically different. It's really alarming how different they are, and how are you going to coach the athlete in front of you? So I know that's a
I
long-winded
do
thought.
I do feel like there's so much out there to your point that coaches can get lost in information. Where do I start? Like, oh my gosh, there's just so much information out there. And I think the best, I'm curious actually what your guys' thoughts are, but for me, it's always like, can you do the education? Like how can you educate yourself on the things that are out there, the things that are available to you based off of, you know, what maybe your peers are saying or what athletes are saying, and then just do the education and do the research yourself. And you maybe start with a place of getting that feedback or from a peer, but then go ahead and actually take the time to go on a website or read the books or whatever it may be for any system that's out there. I think that's important. That's what we try to do at least. We try to be educated on what's out there. But I'm curious your thoughts on a coach that maybe is overwhelmed with the information out there.
Listen, we understand. Hold on, man. I know you can chime in. People want it to be easy. That's America. That's where we're at. DoorDash, everything. People want things to be tech. They want it to tell them something and for it to fix it. I understand that. Trust me. We understand we want things to be easy. It's just not that way. So you're going to cut out a large part of the population right off the bat that aren't growth mindseted, don't want to take the individual in account because they want it easier. That's society. We understand that. That's not what this is for. Maybe this isn't for you, right? That's just what it is. I have this conversation all the time. There's people that want to learn and grow every single day and become better and learn more. And there's people that aren't, that want the easy way out. We're trying to push and prod and build relationships with people that want to grow and learn. Like there's never a day that I wake up that I don't think I can learn something from David and be better, whether I like it or not. There's just that's how I am. So it doesn't mean we're not trying to simplify it for you, which is all we do as well, right? It doesn't mean we're not trying to get you to simplify it to absorb it. And I think the future is going to be in some form of tech, right? Whether it's AI integration or education parameters that make that easier. Like, of course, I think those things are coming. Um, and David's going to say, well, be careful with the primitive reflexes. I understand. There's definitely ways that we're trying to simplify it to educate people better, become more efficient, grow and learn. But it's still, like I said, the bottom line is going to come from a large portion of the population that we're dealing with is going to be wanting to grow and learn and coach the individual. And we know, I understand, it's much easier to do the latter. It just is. That's the way society is. This just isn't going to work for those types of people.
There's a context, I think, related to people that want to use MPs and people that may not want to use MPs because they have their own system and it works. But my question to these people is, are you performing at the level you want and how many injuries you have? Because at one point, when I'm looking at the stats, actually, I found out that on the last 20 years, your global probability to be drafted at the D1 NCAA level is 10 to 11%. Nothing changed in the last 20 years. So no matter what you're doing about biomechanics, no matter what they do about strength and conditioning right now, nothing changed. You still have 10 to 11%. Even like all those new facilities, all those new gurus, all this new information available didn't change anything. You still have 10 to 11% to be drafted. That's it. Simple as this. So if this thing didn't change, that just means for me, like at the bottom line, I think some people really don't care about the value of human life. They don't care really, doesn't matter what they do with their players. They just want to win. If it get broken, well, we're going to change him, take another one. It's simple as this. Well, I think with MP, we're trying kind of change that because we know that human being has a value, and if you have less injuries and better performance, I think it's a better way actually to treat people because you still have 90% of chance to not be drafted. What's going to happen into your life after that? You can break your arm, you can get a Tommy John, you can be ripped out of baseball for life, just because someone apply a system on you and you were not actually fitting into that system. So I think we have to consider, I mean, everything all together. And I don't blame people that have a system because most of the time they have a system, but they are at a place where they can get the best athletes. So that's easy to apply a system because you're going to actually recruit the people that match your system. So when you start to put all those pieces all together of a puzzle, you start to understand why some people may have success with a system. But just remember, they may actually recruit the people that are fitting the system, or they don't care about if they fit or not. They're going to extract everything they can during 4 or 5 years, and after, oof, you got it. So it's just different approach, but knowing that you have 90% of chance to not be drafted. I think players should start to think about being performance and being healthy at their best, and they have like a long life with no pain.
I literally have a player, multiple players, and it's not perfect. Like I'm not perfect, and either is my organization. Multiple players that have gotten Tommy John and got hurt because they still want to go back to the model they did things because at some point they did gain 2 to 3 miles an hour. So they latch on to that success they had then and don't even care the fact that they got surgery. They almost skip over the fact that they got hurt and revert back to like, well, I did gain this. So trust me, you're exactly right. I mean, it's to me that doesn't sound very smart of like, yeah, you did that, but you got hurt and you still want to go back to that facility and train or do things in that manner after you got hurt. But there's people on my own team that have that, and there's people in society that do that, and you're just gonna have to say, okay, and so you're right. It's tough, and you're exactly right. I think the people that fit into certain systems or what they think makes most sense. Sorry,
I'm
Matt.
I'm telling you often, you cannot hammer a nail that is bent. So you cannot actually help people that doesn't want to help themselves first. And it works for player as well.
Don't be a bent nail.
Nope.
Simple. Stay
Matt,
straight.
Matt, go ahead. What about you, Matt, in terms of being able to get coaches and sift through information, just the starting place?
Yeah, I think, the starting place, at least from an MP lens, is starting to understand, the definition of the preferences and then also what you're seeing. I think when we start to tailor it back to MP, it's like, okay, if I have an athlete struggling with direction, okay, what preferences may that relate to? It could be motor shoulder, which drives direction, or it could be an associated player that's creating too much separation and their upper body is just spinning trying to catch up. So once you understand the definition of the preferences, and then you start to look at an athlete, whether they're having balance problems, whether they're having directional issues, okay, what preference does that relate to? So when you start to simplify, okay, what's their problem? What preference may it relate to once I understand the definitions? Then we start to find things that we can start to look at. And a lot of times, when coaches start after understanding all the communication and context and injury history and everything we talked about and observing before even getting into drills and cues, is we start with balance. Balance precedes everything. It's if I'm balanced, it directly correlates to adjustability. If I'm balanced, it directly correlates to vision. So if you're a coach and you're starting out and you are going to do the bare minimum to help your athletes, let's get them balanced. Whether it's flexion versus extension and aerial versus terrestrial, having someone stand up a little bit taller or having someone get a little bit lower in flexion, that's a win. If you want to take it a step further, getting to their number one balance point where it takes the least amount of resources to balance. If we can be there and start there and help athletes, whether it's base running, fielding, pitching, hitting, getting them balanced, we're going to be in a really, really good spot. And a lot of times it cleans up a lot of the issues that we see with the player. So if I'm a coach and I'm starting today, I'm going to do a lengthy process of observing, and then I'm going to go right to balance and making sure everyone's in their one in regards to aerial and terrestrial. That's where I'm going to start as a coach. And then as I give myself time and as I give myself grace, because Swope says it all the time, in our society, we get this new information and we immediately want to impose. Once we go through that observation phase, once we give ourselves grace and just start with balance, okay, then I can start adding little nuances. I have this player that's balanced and it's still a directional issue. Okay, let's see what the motor shoulder's doing. Are they playing into their range of motion or not? So, as a coach, you do not have to go to the nth degree 10 preferences deep with a player. Start with the foundational layer of balance and build from there. And maybe that just might be the fix that they need right there. So, as a coach, start there, start simple, and always ask your player for questions and feedback when you make any changes.
The feedback part of
Roma
that,
has
I'm glad you inserted that.
Roma has not
Uh,
been in one day.
it, yes.
Just be patient, just one step at a time. It works, cool. It doesn't work, okay. What is the next step?
No,
Just
I'm
be
glad you
patient.
put that feedback part in too, because, not only do we need that feedback before making an adjustment, we also need it after making adjustments too, to understand, hey, like, are these adjustments actually making sense to you? Just because it might relate to your profile doesn't mean that it might make sense to you in that moment. And we can try 20 different cues surrounding that same preference. It doesn't have to be just one cue. Um,
Or tech and
and with
data.
that, 100%.
Yeah, you use whatever you need to. Some are visual, some need to see it.
Mhm.
Like you can utilize this with the prep. That's the coolest part. Now you can actually understand how to interpret the deck, the tech and data. That's the cool thing.
No doubt, no doubt. And when we get that final piece of feedback, the last kind of layer of the successful integration comes with the recovery piece, right? I think it's a big part of that. We got to make sure that those athletes are sleeping. We got to make sure that they're recovering well. Um, Also taking into consideration like what's going on in the weight room. Are they getting crushed in the weight room? Is there a ton of posterior work? Is there a ton of anterior work? What does that look like in the weight room that is going to impact them? So all of that kind of goes into what successful implementation and integration of motor preferences is. I'm just curious if you guys have anything that we might have missed or last thoughts on that.
Yeah, I always start relating it to an iPhone battery. When you get an iPhone, you charge it to 100%, that first year, and it gets to 100% to start the day every year. Then after 2 to 3 years, maximum battery capacity might be 86%. Then by the fourth year, it's at 74%, and all of a sudden it's not lasting through a day, and you got to go get a new phone. It's the same thing, with our athletes. And even at a more exaggerated level, if we're having athletes that are working at a profile, we have athletes that are being counterproductive in the weight room because it doesn't translate to the field. If we're having, athletes that are working on T-spine mobility that, rotate through their lumbar and they're actually not going to create separation through their T-spine, like all of those things are going to add up and you're going to start your body battery every day a tick lower. And at the end of the year, when we're in the business of winning championships, and specifically for these softball teams right now, the ability to bounce back and your best players being able to pitch every day and your best hitters being able to show up fresh, or you're in the NBA finals and you're Victor Wembanyama and you're trying to win a series against OKC, like, and to go face the Knicks and then for Knicks' heart to be broken. Like you
Well,
have to be able to be fresh and you have to
Summer.
be able fresh enough to be able to bounce back and be able to compete and deliver. Doesn't You can do anything you want early in the season when you're fresh and you have energy. But now's the most important time of the year and we want to have enough energy as possible to be able to perform for our teams and deliver the goals that we have.
Well,
I saw
with
that
that,
during regionals and super regionals. I saw a lot of players exhausted. I saw it on the screen. You can see it. And actually, you get some results, surprising results, and you're like, what happened in the weight room? Did they sleep well? Did they drink enough? Did they have electrolytes because it was too hot outside? Did they get fresh air, as much as they can because just to cool down the body? It's what we call energy, and without energy, you cannot perform, no matter what. So that's kind of the first basic things. And I agree with Woods, like it's almost like a phone battery. The only issue with us is you cannot change it. You cannot buy a new body. You have what you have. You have to deal with it. So getting older, yes, you have less and less energy. But again, like when you have a long season, of course, at the beginning of the season, you're fresh, you can do everything you want. Oh, it's a marathon. I watched a marathon recently, and the guy passed the finish line walking on his all four. He was like exhausted. He was like not able to walk anymore. People had almost to carry him. And I'm like, well, that's kind of the best example of how intention can push you like very hard. So his goal was probably to pass the line, and he passed it. But when you see his body, I'm like, that's not good. I mean that's good for him, but globally speaking, that's hard for the body, and he was not performing like the minimum thing for a human body, which is walking. He was not even able to walk. So we have to be careful with the energy level, and I think we talked about that in another podcast, but the no pain, no gain is hitting hard. And the
yeah,
fact and the fact also that people are now with a portal, you may have your players for 1 year or 2 years, and now well, who cares? Let's push him. That's what I'm seeing right now, which is kind of sad in my perspective. But that's my own perspective.
Yeah, we're
well, and
pushing
that's
more for
where
the
that,
things. Yeah, we're pushing more for the things we don't want, like all these, system, the portal and redlining players and redlining maximum performance and success in such a microwavable type of situation is definitely not pushing things towards towards what we kind of want and all the things we're talking about. But that's the way it is.
yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that, again, funny enough, we go back to the conversation, the communication parts, and understanding the player and getting the feedback and understanding what their goals are in that moment, and their goals and defining what the coaching staff's goals are, right? Is it to make it to the conference tournament? Is it to make it to the College World Series? What is a coach's goal? What are the players' goals? And how can you be aligned with that more than anything? So essentially, throughout the episode, we've talked about understanding the athlete, observing, doing a ton of observation, getting the feedback, and also part of that reflection part of do we actually need to make an adjustment right now? Is the player performing? If they if we do need to make that adjustment, then comes the integration and understanding that, we can do something as simple as Matt said, like kind of go over just what that preference means and what is the definition of the preference. If they're terrestrial, maybe they just use they're deeper in their legs and they're more towards their heels. And if they're aerial, maybe they're more in extension and towards the balls of their feet. Understanding feedback is a huge part of that again. And then, of course, like we just mentioned, the recovery part, getting enough sleep. So kind of the outline of what successful implementation looks like. You guys got anything else? Matt, need you to hit us one more time. We got the Gasso facility coming up. Let the people know when they can sign up for it.
Yeah, Gasso facility signups are good for the next 3 weeks. We have our early bird special that'll end, June 1st, and then we'll be taking signups for both the player camp and the coaches clinic up until the day before the clinic happens. As always, we're super pumped to put this podcast out every month. We're super pumped. We're going to jump on our monthly community Zoom call. So once you're trained, you're integrated. You're stuck with us, whether you like it or not. We just love pushing this thing forward, helping, if it's one athlete a day, then that's a win for us. And, we appreciate everyone who follows along the podcast and interacts with us. And we can't wait to meet so many more people.
Keep on liking and subscribing. It's the name of the game. Appreciate you guys. Until next time.